Imagine waking up in a tiny village surrounded by enemies and centuries later controlling almost the entire known world. Imagine building an empire so powerful that even today, more than 2,000 years later, its name still inspires fascination, fear, and admiration. Rome was not just a city, Rome became a war machine, an obsession with power, an empire capable of transforming ordinary men into legends while destroying millions of lives along the way. But here is the most incredible part of all. Rome almost never existed, because before the emperors, before the gladiators, before the legions conquering continents, there was only a brutal story of survival, blood, and ambition, and everything began with a legend. According to ancient tradition, two twin brothers named Romulus and Remus were born marked for death. The king at the time feared losing power, so he ordered the babies abandoned near a river to die. Think about that for a moment. The greatest empire in history began with two children sentenced to death. But then something happened that would survive for centuries as one of the most famous images in the world. A she-wolf found the babies, and instead of attacking them, she protected them. The wolf fed the twins until they were discovered by a shepherd. And there, between poverty and survival, the legend of Rome began to grow. But the story quickly turned dark. When they became adults, Romulus and Remus decided to build a city, but the brothers soon began fighting over control. Arguments turned into hatred. Hatred turned into violence, until Romulus killed his own brother. Yes, Rome was literally born from blood, and perhaps that explains much about what it would later become. Because from the very beginning, Rome learned that power mattered more than anything else. At first, Rome was small, weak, surrounded by much stronger enemies. But the Romans possessed something different, an almost terrifying obsession with discipline, war, and expansion. While other peoples fought simply to survive, Rome fought to dominate, and slowly, it began to grow. The Romans created one of the most brutal and efficient armies in history. The Roman legions were not merely soldiers. They were machines trained to obey, endure, and destroy. They marched for miles without complaint, built roads, fortresses, and military camps with incredible speed. And when Rome defeated an enemy, it rarely stopped there. It advanced again and again and again, until everything belonged to Rome. But Rome did not rise through strength alone, it rose through intelligence. The Romans built massive roads connecting enormous territories. They created aqueduct systems carrying water into entire cities. They developed laws, engineering, and military strategies so advanced that nations still study Rome today. But the greater Rome became, the more dangerous it grew. Because absolute power slowly transformed the Roman Republic into something much darker. At first, Rome was governed by senators and politicians. In theory, no single person should possess absolute power. But there was one enormous problem. The generals were becoming more popular than the politicians themselves. And then ambitious men appeared. Men far too dangerous to obey rules. One of them changed history forever. Julius Caesar. His name spread fear throughout Rome. Caesar was brilliant, charismatic, and extremely dangerous. While politicians argued inside the Senate, he conquered massive territories in nearly impossible battles. Gaul fell before him. Millions died. And Roman soldiers began loving Caesar more than the Republic itself. That terrified the senators, because they realized something horrifying. Julius Caesar possessed enough power to destroy Rome or rule it alone. Then Caesar made a historic decision. He crossed the Rubicon River with his army. It may sound simple today, but at that time it was practically a declaration of war against Rome itself. And in that moment, everything changed. The Republic collapsed into civil war, Romans killing Romans, friends betraying friends, families destroyed, and in the end, Caesar won. He became the most powerful man in Rome. But there is something terrifying about power. The greater it grows, the more enemies it creates. Many senators began believing Caesar wanted to become king, and for Romans that was unforgivable. So a silent conspiracy was born. And in 44 BC, one of the most famous assassinations in history took place. Julius Caesar entered the Senate without knowing it would be the final day of his life. Then the attack began, stabbing, screaming, blood, betrayal. More than 20 men participated in the assassination, and according to the famous story, Caesar looked at Brutus, one of his closest allies, and said, "You too, Brutus?" Then he collapsed and died. But instead of saving Rome, the assassination destroyed what remained of it, because another monster was about to rise, Octavian, Caesar's young heir, cold, calculating, patient. While his enemies underestimated him, Octavian slowly eliminated every rival. More wars exploded across Rome, and one of them would decide the future of the world. Mark Antony, ally and lover of Cleopatra, faced Octavian in a massive struggle for control of Rome. Then came the Battle of Actium, ships burning, soldiers dying, the sea covered in blood, and in the end, Octavian won. Mark Antony died, Cleopatra died too, and Rome ceased to be a republic. Now there was something new, the Roman Empire, and Octavian received another name, Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. That was when Rome entered its most powerful age. Cities expanded, trade exploded, gigantic monuments appeared. The Colosseum was built. Gladiators fought to the death while crowds screamed with excitement. Imagine entering that enormous arena surrounded by 50,000 people hungry for blood. Rome transformed violence into entertainment. But while the people distracted themselves with games and battles, the emperors accumulated absolute power, and some of them became true monsters: Caligula, Nero, Commodus, men surrounded by luxury, paranoia, and madness. Some stories claim Caligula tried making his horse a politician. Nero supposedly played music while Rome burned. Emperors ordered the executions of allies, relatives, and anyone considered dangerous. Because in Rome, power rarely survived without blood. But even amid corruption and violence, Rome still seemed unstoppable. The legions continued advancing endlessly. Britain, Egypt, Greece, parts of Germany, the Middle East, North Africa. Rome controlled territories so enormous it seemed impossible to govern them all. And perhaps that was exactly the beginning of the fall, because the larger the empire became, the harder it was to control. The borders suffered constant attacks from enemy tribes. Corruption destroyed the government from within. Emperors were assassinated repeatedly. Generals fought each other for power. And slowly, the machine began breaking apart. Then another force appeared that would transform Rome forever: Christianity. At first, Christians were brutally persecuted. Many were imprisoned, tortured, and killed inside the Colosseum before cheering crowds. Rome viewed this new religion as a threat. But something unexpected happened. Christianity continued growing, despite persecution, despite executions, until one emperor made a historic decision. Constantine legalized Christianity. And slowly, Rome began changing not only politically, but spiritually. But the military problems kept worsening. Barbarian tribes attacked the borders constantly. The empire became so massive and difficult to control that it was eventually divided into two halves: the Western Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, and that was when collapse accelerated. The Western side descended into economic chaos, corruption, and endless internal wars. Soldiers were no longer loyal like before. Emperors rose and fell rapidly. Some ruled only months before being murdered. Rome was dying slowly. Then came the final blow, 476 AD. A barbarian leader named Odoacer removed the last Western Roman emperor from power. And just like that, the greatest empire in the world fell. No massive explosion, no final heroic speech, only exhaustion, chaos, and decay. The empire that once ruled continents simply disappeared. But here is the most astonishing part of all. Rome never truly died. Because even today, the world still carries its fingerprints: our laws, our roads, our architecture, our calendar, our politics. Even many words we use were born in Rome. It is almost as if the empire still lives, hidden inside modern civilization. And perhaps that is exactly what makes Rome's story so fascinating, because it reveals both the best and the worst of humanity at the same time: discipline, ambition, intelligence, conquest, but also violence, corruption, obsession with power, and destruction. Rome built incredible wonders, and also killed millions to maintain them. And perhaps the most terrifying question is this: is every great empire destined to fall the same way? Now tell me something. Do you believe Rome was the greatest civilization in history, or an empire built on violence and fear? Comment below, because I really want to hear your opinion. And if you enjoy real stories more intense than movies, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because the next story will surprise you even more.